Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back for the final session, session 8, which will be followed by the concluding session. Session 8 is Guided Meditation on Bodhicitta by Venerable Geshe Lhakdor, Director, Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. Geshe Lhakdor is known to us all through his contribution to the conference. He has been a mentor, guide, and an immensely illuminating guiding light for the conference. Geshe Lhakdor.
So, with my dealings with you yesterday, you must have thought हम लोगों ने मेडिटेशन के लिए रिक्वेस्ट किया, इसने तो बोलते गया कुछ भी मेडिटेशन नहीं हुआ. You might think like this, right? So therefore, if you like, you can sit quiet for 1 minute. that is meditation, okay? And I taught you a little bit about the breathing meditation. So, but what I want to tell you is when we talk about meditation, I explained the meaning of meditation. But there are many types of meditation. So I'll briefly explain few of them. One is meditation on the object, like meditation on this flower. So when you meditate on this flower, your mind develops in your mind the aspect of that flower. You think about it. That is, meditation on the object. Then there is more like subjective meditation. When we talk about meditation on compassion and loving kindness, bodhicitta, we don't use bodhicitta and compassion and love out there and then focus on it. Here in this case, you transform your mind as much as possible into that state of loving kindness, compassion and bodhicitta. So that is the difference. Number 2, then we have one-pointed meditation and analytical meditation. One-pointed meditation means, as the word itself says very clearly, meditating just on one point. That's not easy, because normally our mind is completely distracted towards all sides. And the importance of that one-pointed meditation is, as somebody said, both in war and in peace, the success depends on concentration. If you don't concentrate, you are not going to achieve or do anything properly. Not just Buddhist practice, anything. And in order to concentrate, many people ask me, yes, Geshe-la, the Buddhist text says you should concentrate, but we don't know how to concentrate. Please tell me. Then I tell them the first thing that you should do is you need to like what you are doing. जिस चीज़ में आप काम कर रहा है उसमें आपको दिलचस्पी है ही नहीं, फिर कंसंट्रेशन कहाँ से होगा? Like people who play football or train in music, because they are interested, they seize every opportunity. Their mind is not distracted. But when you are asked to do some spiritual practice, number one, you don't have much idea what is this spiritual practice is, therefore not much interest. So you just sit there for hours and days. You have really no idea what you are doing, and you are not interested, right? Right? So you need to like. In order to like it, you need to see this as a very rare opportunity. So therefore, if I just give you a glimpse of the whole process of the stages of the path, Lamrim, then the Buddhist texts, they say, you should think about using this human life, precious human life, in a very meaningful way. What you have obtained today is not something that you can waste it, ignore it lightly. Don't expect that you will obtain this precious human life again and again. This is probably the rare opportunity, number one. And also, how long you are going to live, nobody knows. It may be, today may be your last day. Sorry to say that. Because we all want to live, right? But the reality is different. So therefore, now when you think about how to use this precious human life in a meaningful way, and you have no idea, then you look for a qualified teacher. There is a text by Tsongkhapa called Yonten Shigyurma, Foundation of All Qualities, where the text says the foundation of all qualities is you are finding a spiritual teacher. And that is very, very important. You don't have to take 12 years to examine, which is said in the text. That may be too long, but at least you do some analysis and research to find the right teacher. That's very important. And so that's the first thing. Find a good spiritual teacher. Because these days there are many teachers who are just doing business. मेरे पास आओ, मेरे पास सब कुछ है, मैं आपको दूंगा, मैं ज्ञानी हूँ, I have clairvoyance, I have there are many people who say this. You can fly in 1 week. Many things are there. So you need to take some time. So finding right teacher means the teacher should of course be more qualified than you, otherwise he cannot teach. And that's not enough. And the second, and in fact most important quality is the teacher should be compassionate. So that when you approach and seek the guidance of the teacher, there's no opportunity for you to be misused or exploited, taking advantage of your money and so forth. And then the teacher should be able to spend some time with you, devote some time to help you. At least 3. There are many qualities, but at least these 3 things are very, very, very important. Okay? So find a good teacher, and then you should think about the preciousness of this human life, as I've already mentioned. And most of us are now not anymore young. We have already, I do not dare to say that you have wasted your life. You must have been doing many good things. But still, it is also possible that we may not have used our precious human life in a proper way. So let us make a devotion to make the rest of the life meaningful. Precious human life. And we call this life precious human life because you have this amazing human intelligence. An unfortunate thing that is happening in today's world is this amazing human intelligence is used in the wrong way. The intelligence itself or the brain itself is like the nuclear energy. It's neither good nor bad. It's just a power, a potential. Now if you use it properly, then you can also become the Dalai Lama and many other Buddha and so forth. If you misuse it, again those people who misuse it, there is a long list there also. There are people who under whose rule, millions of people killed and died and still happening, things like that. So think about using this precious human life, which means using this human intelligence in the most profitable way. Although you have found this precious, the second point you need to think about is, although you have found this precious human life, as I said, but it is not sure how long you are going to live. So impermanence, death, which may be tomorrow, as I said. So therefore, there's not much time. You cannot say, okay, next year, okay, I'll attend this session, I'll attend this teaching next year when I have holiday. Things like that, no. As much as possible. Of course, you can't give up everything right away, but at least take the first step, do something. Don't get too excited, of course, because for the first few days you get too excited and you forget even your food and things like that. Then after that, there's no sign of practice. You should not do that. Be realistic and start taking the first few steps. Right? Be realistic, I'm saying, because there are some who get very excited when they hear such teaching. It happened at the time of Milarepa. Milarepa is such a great teacher. So there was somebody who was watching what Milarepa was doing. He was very, very impacted. And he said, oh, I should be really like Milarepa. He threw away all his belongings. And in 3 days he started suffering because his mind was not prepared like Milarepa. So then he said, oh, this Milarepa fellow, not only he is a beggar, he also made me a beggar. So therefore you should be realistic also. But realistic doesn't mean just wait and wait and wait, nothing happen. Right? When the spiritual instructors, they tell people you need to do this practice 6 times a day or 3 times a day, they say, why I have to do this so many times? So I tell them that how many times you have to eat for your body? At least 3-4 times in a day. So similarly, your spiritual practice is your food for the mind. And I have been saying, much of the problem that we are suffering today is clear indication of starvation of human mind. Nothing else. Starvation of human mind. Kuch nahi khilaya. So think about impermanence. And then it's definite, sooner or later you will die. And now the question is, many people think, okay, just like tree, once we die, then that's the end of the story. There are many philosophical explorations that have been done. What happens after death? What is the meaning of human life? तो कई लोग बोलते हैं, अरे कल किसने देखा है, खाओ पियो मौज मस्ती करो, कल किसने देखा है. This kind of philosophy is not prevalent only among ordinary people, but among some philosophers. And some people, they say, oh, this life is full of suffering, problem, why should I live? They commit suicide. There's so many things that I can tell you. Those things happened, right? So, but at least, according to Buddhist teaching, it says when you die, you do not disappear into nothingness, and you will take a rebirth, and that rebirth will be dependent upon what kind of karma, what kind of karmic imprint that you left on your mind. Okay, I have no time to elaborate on this. Then you develop this aspiration to get liberated. Now, in order to get liberated, first you should see the limitations of this worldly existence, the force of the samsara, as we call it, right? The people we want to meet, we are unable to meet. The people we don't want to meet seem to be always standing at your door and waiting for you. So many ups and downs, so many problems, aging, death, sickness, birth, so many things. I don't want to make your life miserable by recounting all this. Anyway, there's a lot of suffering, a lot of problems, limitations. Think about that. When you see the limitations, the problems, then your mind will think about moving somewhere else. Like, for example, if you're really not happy with your neighborhood, you will think about moving to some other place. If not America, at least to Bombay or somewhere else. So similarly, if you see the limitation, then you think about, okay, now this is far from enough. I should really start thinking about something. So then you think about the wish to get liberated from this bondage in the samsara. Bondage means bondage by the negative emotions. Anger, jealousy, hatred. If you look and you watch any of the movies, Indian movies or American movies, any movies, the two few scenes that you see, prominent scenes that you see is sex and killing, violence. This is a depiction of our life. If you are violent and quarrel with somebody, fight with somebody, or you have sex, things like that, then ordinarily we think this life is colorful. That's why many people think, ye guru ban gaya, kya ban gaya? Colorless life. अब लोग मौज मस्ती कैसे करता है पूछता है कई लोग, है ना? So they think life is colorless, dull. So colorful means violence and sex, things like that. But then the result of all those, I don't have to explain. So develop this wish to get liberated. In order to develop genuine wish to practice renunciation or liberated, you need to maintain mindfulness in your day-to-day practice. You need to maintain conscientiousness. You need to be heedful. 3 things. Many people these days talk about mindfulness, but they don't talk much about conscientiousness, shijin, and pakyu, heedfulness. So that is very, very important. And then, when you think about getting liberated, okay, even if I get liberated, this is just for me. What about the rest of the sentient beings? The mother sentient beings, as we call it. Then you start thinking, okay, getting liberated from samsara is good, but to forget the rest of beings and to just get this, liberation just for oneself is a little bit selfish. Then you think about cultivating bodhicitta. May I become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, right? And then, having cultivated bodhicitta, this is, as I explained, aspirational bodhicitta, which is good, but you need to take bodhisattva vow, and having taken the bodhisattva vow, you engage in the practice of the 6 perfections, which includes meditation and wisdom, understanding emptiness. After that, having equipped yourself with the common practices, then you enter into the tantric practice. The way to enter into the tantric practice is receiving tantric empowerment, abhishek, empowerment. Now people may wonder what is empowerment, how does it make a difference? It's like the gentleman, somebody who is elected as Prime Minister today. The person who was not a Prime Minister yesterday and the person who is nominated as a Prime Minister today, in terms of actual quality, there is hardly any difference, right? But because you are empowered, that makes the difference. So tantric practice, empowerment is very, very important. and you receive that tantric empowerment, and then you engage in the practice of the four classes of Tantra, especially in the Mahayana case, you enter into the practice of the two higher tantric practices, generation stage and completion stage. And then more important is to observe the vows and pledges properly, and they pray that I be free from all kind of obstructions and I meet the right guru teacher for many lives to come, things like. So there is kind of complete path. So it is important. Those of you who are interested, at the end of Tsongkhapa Lamrim Chemo, there is like 3-4 pages summarizing the whole path. Extremely, extremely important. Once His Holiness was giving a teaching to a very senior Indian practitioner, then after the teaching His Holiness said, get this part translated. So I translated it. So if anybody wants it, I'll email it to you. Okay, so the main point that we are discussing today is, we discuss a little bit about aspirational bodhicitta, which means the wish to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. May I become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. That is aspirational. That is the wish to become Buddha, which is amazing, which is excellent. But the wish alone is not enough. The second step is, you take the bodhisattva vow. That means I will cultivate this mind, I will never give up this mind, and not only I aspire to become enlightened, but I will practice the precepts. So practice the precepts means the precepts of practicing the 10 or 6 practitioners: giving, generosity, practice of morality, practice of patience, and making effort, and then concentration, and then wisdom, things like that. Okay? So now, because we don't have much time, when my time finishes, please let me know. So now let us almost like move towards the concluding part, not yet, but something like. So we talk about, on the conventional level, we talk about the aspirational bodhicitta and the engaging bodhicitta. Okay? Then when you receive a tantric initiation and empowerment and so forth, or even otherwise, the master will talk about the conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Now think about this clearly. Conventional bodhicitta means bodhicitta, it's same. Ultimate bodhicitta is not bodhicitta. That's why that somebody who was a little bit confused was asking me this question, When you understand lack of inherent existence of everything, that is bodhicitta, so why, there are differences and things like that. So ultimate bodhicitta is not bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta is wisdom, understanding, emptiness. That is also called bodhicitta because that wisdom also, of course, leads to the actualization of enlightenment, Buddhahood. Right? So now why these two? So our focus today is cultivation of these two minds, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Why these two are important? Why these two are important? These two are important because we want to become enlightened. Now in order to become enlightened, there are certain positive paths that you must cultivate. There are certain negative obstructions, afflictive emotions, which you must discard. Now the two primary obstructions for cultivation of this true mind is self-cherishing attitude and self-grasping. This word's a little bit bombastic, but self-cherishing attitude means, it does not mean you cannot think about yourself. It means thinking just about oneself, completely ignoring the well-being or needs of others. मुझे ही मिलना चाहिए. अगर मुझे पैसा मिल रहा है, नाम मिल रहा है, I don't care what happens. Unfortunately, many people do this these days. So therefore, self-cherishing attitude means thinking just about yourself and not at all about others. That is a big obstruction for cultivation of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta talks about becoming Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Now this stupid, narrow-minded mind says, I don't care. I want happiness just for myself. Okay. Then the second enemy is self-grasping, as we call it, which is a difficult word, which basically means sometimes we use the word ignorance. In Buddhism, we say ignorance is the root cause of samsara, which is of course true. Now here, what you need to know is ignorance here is not just a lack of knowledge. That is also there, but ignorance primarily means misconception of reality. Abhi dhyan se sunna. Ignorance is not just lack of knowledge, but misconception of reality. If it is just lack of knowledge, it's slightly tolerable, slightly better. But to make the matter worse, you have this lack of knowledge, but in addition to that, you have this misconception of reality. Now when we say misconception of reality, what is the reality that you are talking about? The reality is that everything is interdependent, interconnected, patit samutpada. But our stupid mind don't see that. Especially when you are angry, upset, and you say, I can do it. Why the hell I have to depend upon others? ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं जो मैं नहीं कर सकता है. And with this kind of attitude, people get so intoxicated that they jump in front of a machine gun. अगर किसी को आपको बोलो, आप तो बहुत बहादुर आदमी है, you are very brave person, हाँ, आपको मेडल भी मिलेगा, तो बोलता है हाँ मैं बहादुर हूँ, मशीन गन के सामने दौड़ दिया. ये हो रहा है आज भी, पुराना कहानी नहीं है, ठीक है ना. So this is how we kill ourselves, commit suicide. Misconception of reality. Reality is, if you look at the reality of your life, outside is a little bit better, but inside, the more fragile things are packed inside. That is in accordance with the modern system of packing. In accordance with the modern system of packing also, whatever is fragile is packed nicely. And not only that, they will write a caption saying, fragile, carefully, handle carefully. That's what we see at the airport all the time. So this has been done like this. It's very, very fragile. So sometimes I do think that we should put a placard here saying, please handle me carefully, I'm very fragile. Which is really, really true. Now if you look at inside, what is there inside? The lungs, the kidneys, the hearts, how they are functioning, it is really, really, you will understand the meaning of impermanence. And because we don't understand this impermanence, this fragility, forget about taking great care, even in terms of food, you are unable to take care. हम सोचते हैं कि जो भी मुंह में डाला ठीक है, खट्टा मीठा जो भी डालते जाओ इधर, कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. This is how we become sick, physically also. So mentally also like that. Right? So therefore this misconception of reality is source of all the problems. So misconception is seeing something that is not there as there, something that is having no inherent existence, seeing them as inherent existence. अब ये कैसे होता है? How this kind of misconception create problem? I'll give you a very beautiful example, a story that is very well circulated in the ancient Indian philosophical system. There was one Guruji, so he was teaching few of his students at the side of a beautiful river. Then after the teaching, the teacher said, okay, take this book and put it on the table in my living room. And the student goes and comes back. Guruji, मैं वहाँ नहीं जा सकता है, मुझे डर लग रहा है, वहाँ सांप है. तो गुरुजी बोलता है कोई बात नहीं, मैं आपको एक मंत्र जपने के लिए दूंगा, वो मंत्र जपते हुए अब जाओ वहाँ, फिर सांप डर के भाग जाएगा, फिर वो रख देना. Then he again goes reciting this mantra, didn't help. Then he said, गुरुजी मैंने आपका मंत्र जपा लेकिन वो सांप नहीं भागा. फिर गुरुजी बोलता है कि ओके ये lantern लो, take this lamp. And we took the lamp or the light and approached. There was no snake. It was a coil of rope. अब देखो इसमें, there's no snake, there's a coil of rope, but because of your misconception that there is a snake, that situation creates you a fear equal to your having encountered a real snake. ऐसा होता है. This is the story. So misconception of reality. So therefore, it is highly, highly important to see this, grosser and subtle level of interdependence. And this concept of interdependence is accepted by all the Buddhist philosophical schools. There are different variations of interpretation, subtleties of interpretation, but they all believe in interdependent origination. And in today's world, of course, we are hurled into the face of each other through the speed of science and technology, and we can clearly see how much we are dependent upon each other. थोड़ा आप कुछ गलती करेंगे मैं आपको टैरिफ लगा दूंगा, हिल गया आपको, है ना? हाँ, यूक्रेन में वॉर हो रहा है, ग्रेन शॉर्टेज हो गया, कितना examples are there, so many examples are there, not so difficult to understand, right? The other day I was talking about the need to understand the law of nature. The law of nature, the subtlest law of nature is interconnected reality. Now I will simplify this a little bit. When you talk about undertaking Buddhist practice, you are basically doing this practice. Let us imagine two parties, political parties and election, we are all quite familiar. So I'll give you example like that. Now here in this case, you don't have many parties, you have two parties. The party of the negative emotion, party of the positive emotion. The party of negative emotions are led by the two generals or president or prime minister. Okay, one is self-cherishing attitude, one is ignorance. ये boss है. और इस तरफ कौन है? इस तरफ बोधिचित है and wisdom realizing emptiness दोनों है. ठीक है ना? Now अभी हमारा हालत है देखो. Both of these two parties are trying to capture the headquarter of your mind. They have been trying this for centuries, for many lives. So if you look at the present situation, किसने विजय प्राप्त किया है? Who has gained victory? अभी the negative force, self-cherishing attitude and ignorance, they have not only won, but they won with majority, landslide majority. कैप्चर करके बैठा है, यहाँ बैठा है अभी, हेडक्वार्टर में बैठा है. सेल्फ चेरिशिंग एटीट्यूड एंड इग्नोरेंस दोनों यहाँ बैठा है, मज़े में चाय कॉफ़ी पी रहा है, पाँव हाथ फैला हुआ बैठा है, इसको कोई मुकाबले करने वाला नहीं, कोई प्रैक्टिस तो हम लोग करता ही नहीं. ये तो बुद्धिस्ट में ये टीच करता है, बाकी में तो है ही नहीं. Then among the Buddhist fold also, how many people practice this? Lack of education, lack of information, so many things. So there's nobody challenging them. So they are having a fine time. But somehow due to the kindness of Atisa, Tsongkhapa, Guru Rinpoche and Buddha, of course, they are saying, no, this is no time to relax. Now you should strengthen the force of Bodhicitta, strengthen the force of wisdom, understanding, shunyata, and wage a war and dethrone the two bosses of negative emotion, self-cherishing attitude and self-grasping ignorance. Dethrone two of them plus all the other negative emotions, and in their place enthrone Bodhicitta and wisdom, understanding, and emptiness. So Bodhicitta, of course, is really like extremely important, as Shantideva repeatedly says in his Bodhicitta Avatara. If you develop Bodhicitta even for a moment, your many lives of negative deeds will be purified and things like that. But the one that directly encounters in removing the ignorance is wisdom, understanding, emptiness. Because ignorance, as I said, is misconception of reality. A mind which sees things as having inherent independent existence. And such a mind's direct counterforce is a mind which sees that this is not true. Things don't exist independently. They exist dependently. Right? So therefore that is the direct counterforce, not bodhicitta, not compassion, nor love. Right? So now what you need to do, I'll try to explain a little bit about the meaning of emptiness, because many a times when people talk about emptiness, then they say, oh, emptiness is so difficult. Students also say, oh, emptiness is so difficult. उसने emptiness के ऊपर बोला, मुझे कुछ भी समझ में नहीं आया. और गुरु भी बोलता है, this is difficult, But for me, that is a little bit not so correct. If you realizing and experience it is of course not easy. But explaining it a little bit is not that difficult. So let me give you example. Now I'll make India great. both of these two concepts, the mathematical concept of zero and philosophical concept of shunyata, originated from this great land, India. And both of them have same implication, more or less same implication. Because when we say zero, people think, oh, zero means there's nothing. No. Without zero, you can't have 10, you can't have 100, you see. It's very important. So similarly, emptiness means not nothingness. It's fullness. Right? So emptiness means, now listen carefully. Emptiness means not nothingness. Emptiness means empty of, many of you know very well, just say it. Emptiness means empty of independent existence, inherent existence. Because in this world, when we talk about existence, there are only two possibilities. Either they should exist dependently or they should exist independently. Dependent existence, independent existence, these two are mutually exclusive. There is no third possibility. So, आपने एक को पकड़ना है. So now I'll ask this question again. Of anything that you see, you experience, you feel, do you think they have dependent existence or independent existence? Huh? Please answer. All phenomena. If you come up with one example of independent existence, we need to think about it. Anything. Water, tree, forest, house, the food you ate, whatever, the people you are meeting, everything. Do they exist dependently or independently? What's your answer? Huh? थोड़ा जोर से बोलो यार. Dependently, na? Dependently. Now you need to think in what way it is dependent. Anything that is existent is either dependent on its causes and conditions, especially in the case of conditioned phenomena, or they should depend on the parts. The whole is dependent on the part is dependent on the whole. That's one way of dependence. Third, probably the most pervasive, is everything is dependent on the designation. Designation. You put a name. For example, this is microphone, right? This is microphone. Is this microphone? If I say I am now speaking through the microphone, will you be surprised? No. If I say now I am going to speak through the elephant, you will be shocked, you will be surprised, you might think, okay, Geshe Lhakdor is now out of his mind. But why this is microphone, not elephant? Tell me. What is it that made it microphone? Because for communication, for the sake of communication, name is needed. Nothing more than that. So in order to communicate, somebody came up with this idea, okay, let us call this microphone. And that name, naming did not contradict anything existent. So everybody said, okay, no problem, let us call it microphone. That's how we give the name and designation. Now since we agreed to call it, and we have been calling this as microphone for so many times, so many years, now if somebody stupid like me comes and says, I'm speaking through the elephant, they'll say he's insane. But right in the beginning, if somebody had given this name elephant, today if I say I'm speaking through the elephant, you will not be surprised. This is the meaning of designation. Everything is designated. Although everything is just merely designated, but we don't see it as merely designated, but we tend to see that, behind the designation there is something. To the object where the name or designation is given, it should be something. That Tenzin means Tenzin from its own side. Ramesh means Ramesh existing from own side. कुछ भी नहीं ऐसा. सिर से पांव तक अब ढूंढो, कहाँ है रमेश, कहाँ है सोहन मोहन, जो भी है ना. So that's the thing. So therefore, what we are trying to do in terms of cultivation of bodhicitta is, of course, the long-term purpose is becoming Buddha, to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in this practice, the two most important practice that you do is cultivation of bodhicitta, and cultivation of wisdom that sees shunyata or sees the reality as it is. The obstruction to this is self-cherishing attitude and ignorance, seeing things as having inherent existence. Now the problem is to really reduce self-cherishing attitude, to really reduce ignorance is an uphill task. It's an uphill task because we are so much used with ignorance. We, as I mentioned the other day, we are so addicted to negative emotions. Attachment नहीं होना है. 1000 बार बोलो attachment नहीं होना है, बहुत मुश्किल है. Anger नहीं होना है, बहुत मुश्किल है. Ignorance तो इतना गहराई में फंसा हुआ है कि हम लोग उसके बारे में ज़्यादा चर्चा भी नहीं करता है. जबकि ignorance is the root of all these negative emotions. We hardly even talk about it. We are not familiar. So how can you fight an enemy about which you have no idea? Right? So therefore, what we need to see as a practitioner, or even otherwise, what we need to see is see all these negative emotions as our sworn enemy. What is the definition of enemy? Enemy is somebody who destroys your name, your fame, your family, your relatives, and so forth, right? Anger does the same thing. It destroys your health. Blood pressure बढ़ेंगे, headache होगा, फिर fighting होगा, separation होगा. अभी यहाँ हो रहा है, युद्ध हो रहा है, हजारों की संख्या में मर रहा है दोनों साइड में. दुनिया के कई क्षेत्र में ये हो रहा है. ऐसे कई सुनी वाली बात तो नहीं है, ये हो रहा है. This all happening because of negative emotions inside, ahankar inside. I have to conquer this world so that they'll call me the great powerful president, so that I can stay as long as possible on my chair. Right? So even in one's own life, if you think really carefully, and I've been in a challenging note telling people, if you really come up with some strong evidence that these negative emotions are very, very useful, why not practice it? If anger you really think is very good, sometimes people think, okay, anger maybe not so bad. Sometimes chahiye humko. When people bully me, then I need anger. People think like that. Yes, they say this because when you get angry, you get some extra energy, right? Which makes you a little bit bold and is able to say something which you are unable to say, do something which you are unable to do. So you start thinking anger is useful. It's true, when you get angry, you get some energy, but those energies are essentially blind energy. So it's unsure it will hit the target or not. Hai. And I was telling the other day also, even in terms of material benefit, America loses billions of dollars because of anger. Because of anger, America loses billions of dollars. Similarly, if you make a calculation in any country, the destructive effect of anger in India or anywhere, we should start doing that. Because these days, when people see the destructive effect of economics, then they might pay more attention. Do it. Very destructive. Right? Then attachment. Attachment, dekho. Every country is now talking about increase of GDP every year. Is it possible? When we talk about the increase of GDP or material development, they are talking about physical development. This material physical development has to come from external material physical resources, the forest, the water, right? And anything that is physical, material, be it water, be it mineral resource, they have limitation. They have limitation. How can you make unlimited progress from limited resources? You will end up destroying everything. The result of which is we were seeing today, the amount of pollution that you see here, just here where we are. As simple as that. Right? So therefore, people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they have been saying that in terms of material progress, the real criteria, whether you are making material development or not, is not the growth of GDP, but the standard of living of everybody. Now, if you think about the standard of living of everybody, there are some who are extremely, extremely rich, valuing in wealth. There are millions valuing in poverty. Standard thing. And we are talking about GDP growth. Right? So therefore, the point that I am making is, if you look at the health of the economic health of this world also, it's very, very destructive when you develop these negative emotions. And as I mentioned yesterday also, the good news is if you start doing something, this is in accordance with the law of nature. It will preserve the nature. It will ensure that you get clean water to drink, clean forest, clean environment. All this is possible because doing good things supports the growth of the law of nature. Doing negative things is against the law of nature. Today we are under the illusion that we can fight the law of nature. Artificial intelligence बनाओ, चैट जीपीटी बनाओ, एयर कंडीशन लगाओ, अरे हमने पूरा दुनिया को कब्जा कर लिया. नहीं भाई, नो, अभी कुछ भी कब्जा नहीं किया. जो गलत काम तुम कर रहा है उसका फल आपको भोगना है. Right? So therefore this teachings of the Buddha, very detailed teachings of the Buddha, and distilled into the practice of bodhicitta and wisdom, understanding, emptiness. These are not necessities. These are not just luxuries. They are almost like basic necessities, without which we can't expect a holistic future. It's almost like do and die kind of question. So therefore, कितना हो गया? कितना मिनट है? हाँ? क्या करूँ 15 minutes में? हाँ? तो okay. So good enough. So I've said what I wanted to say. Then the important thing is we should, because this year we are also celebrating His Holiness's 90th birthday as the year of love and compassion. So it is wonderful that we have organized such a gathering, talking about a great person like Atisa, and talking about this nectar-like teachings of Atisa, which contains all this that I have been explaining, the bodhicitta, wisdom, understanding, emptiness, and so forth. So therefore I appeal to you all that let us take some small steps. Ultimate aim is bodhicitta, wisdom, understanding, emptiness, but take some small steps in accordance with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's wish. If you can help others as much as you can, that is Mahayana. If you can't help, at least refrain from harming, that is Theravada practice. So both practices are very simple in a way. And the Buddha himself has said this. Do not commit any negative deed. Do perfectly well the positive deeds. Completely discipline your mind. This is my teaching. Very simple. This is from Sutra, Buddha. He said, don't do anything that is negative. Buddha did not say, these things you should not do, these negative things you can do. नहीं बोला. ये सब poison है. Poison खाने से, कोई भी खाने से, रंग रूप कैसे भी हो, poison खाने से आप मरेगा. So don't do anything that is negative. He was very emphatic. Don't do anything that is negative. Do perfectly well the positive things. When you do something good, compassion, then do it perfectly means your motivation should be good. Your actual implementation should be good. Then in the conclusion, you should rejoice. Like for example, this gathering, at the end we should all rejoice. We spent 2 days sitting here, not wasting our time. We are at least trying to do something good. Rejoice. Right? And many people, they say, many people who don't want to practice or don't want to study, they say, church is the same sangpo chiyero, and they mangpo kharchin jangore. That means to do dharma practice means to have a good mind. So why the hell the monks are spending so much time reading books, studying? Therefore the Buddha said, don't do anything that's negative, do perfectly well everything that's positive, but this cannot be done easily unless you train your mind, completely train your mind. So training your mind training, which is so popular these days, basically means training your mind in the conventional bodhicitta, in the ultimate bodhicitta. That is the essence. You read any of the mind training text, the 7-point mind or 37 bodhisattva practices, and so many of this mind training like the rays of the sun, any of these texts you read, the focus is these two, developing conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Okay, thank you. I finish here.